Hi, I'm Lauren Milne. I'm an assistant professor at Macalester College. And I'm going to talk today about accessible computer programming, and in particular, the application I created, Blocks4All. And I'm presenting on behalf of myself and also Richard Ladner, who's a professor emeritus at University of Washington. And I'll give a brief talk outline. First of all, talking a little bit about the motivation about why you should care about computer science and particular accessible computer science. Um, Talk a little bit about how a lot of the current tools are not very accessible. And then talk through a number of different accessible programming tools and resources. And then finally talk a little bit about the programming environment I created called Blocks4All, and in particular, kind of demonstrate it, talk a little bit about the experimental features, and then talk a little bit about we're trying to expand it to work with switch control. So asking for any feedback around making it more accessible with switch control, and if there are any people who might be a good fit for sort of testing it out for us. And then finally, there'll be time for questions and answers at the end. Briefly talking a little bit about motivation. Why should we care about teaching computer science and computer programming in general? Really, it's just the kind of the state of the world is becoming much more computer centric, a lot more technology oriented. So learning to code is really an important skill for all students to learn. I think there's obviously I'm a little biased as a computer science professor, but I think it is really important to have an understanding of sort of how computers are working and how these algorithms are working underneath to sort of understand and even kind of function in our modern society. From the student perspective, I think computing skills can really lead to some good careers and some nice career paths. And I do want to note that there are a lot of sort of computer adjacent, it doesn't just have to be software engineers, but there are a lot of like software engineering adjacent careers that are really, it's useful to have this sort of skill set around computer programming and this knowledge of computers. I want to mention that there are a lot of resources for getting students with disabilities into the field of computing. So I'll highlight some that are in Washington State. There's a big push at the University of Washington to support this. There's the Do It group, Disabilities, Opportunities, Internetworking and Technology at the University of Washington, and then Access Computing. And they both connect mainly older students, so students in higher education with internships and other connections within computer science. There's also a fair amount of interest in industry in sort of bringing in people with disabilities, both as programmers, but also as sort of testing and sort of making sure that everything is accessible. And so there's a lot of career pathways into computing. So how do you actually get students thinking about and starting to learn to code? Well, now most introductory programming languages, I would say, are really modeled around these block-based programming languages. So this one is Scratch, which is, you may have heard of it. It's one of the more popular programming languages. But this is an example of what a screenshot looks like of Scratch. And it's got these puzzle piece-like units of code in the middle that you drag and drop and you put together just like you put together a puzzle. So it's sort of a fun, intuitive way for kids or anyone to learn to code. And this particular program, it's when this green flag is clicked, this little cat avatar will move forward 10 steps, then it will turn right 15 degrees, and then it will say hello 10 times. So this is like what's called a repeat loop, where it'll just keep doing whatever code is inside of the loop, however many times you tell it to. So this is a really nice sort of fun way to learn to code. There's essentially a menu of options typically in these programming environments. So you don't have to necessarily know anything. You can just start dragging and dropping things into the workspace without sort of knowing what you're doing, and you'll get the cat to do something. And they're fantastic for the most part. But of course, there are actually some challenges with it, and most probably a lot of them, and Scratch in particular, don't tend to work very well with assistive technology. So they're not accessible for a lot of students with disabilities. So with Scratch, you currently can't access the elements with, a screen reader. It won't read aloud what these elements are, or with a switch, so it's not necessarily keyboard accessible. They also tend to rely on drag and drop interactions, which can be really challenging for a lot of students. And yeah, I would say even 10 years ago, there were not any options that were accessible. But luckily, this has been sort of a fruitful field of research in the last 5 or so years. And there's been a outpouring of different accessible programming resources for these kids that are actually, accessible. So I was going to talk through those briefly, or some of them. This is not conclusive or a complete list, but some of the cool ones that I'm aware of. First of all, the American Printing House puts together a coding symposium every year. So this is a link, but I'll also, well, I don't think I have to put it in the slides because it's in the I mean in the Zoom chat. But it's this sort of National Day of Code. It's a virtual event this year on December 10th, but sort of allows students who are blind or low vision to sort of engage with people in industry and with teachers and learn how to code, which is pretty cool. The APH also has some different resources. So it has Code Quest, which is an iPad and an iPhone app, which is free on their website and on the App Store. And you kind of guide this little astronaut around on missions. And it is, once again, a block-based programming language. So you can see it looks sort of similar to Scratch, where you're dragging in these like blocks of code. They also have Code Jumper, which is these sort of tactile blocks that you can stick together in parallel to build up programmings. This one is not free; it's $1,000, but could be useful in a classroom, and really engaging for students because it is so tactile. The other thing they do is they had partnered with Apple. So Apple has a set of programming exercises called Swift Playgrounds, where you get to learn to program in Swift, which is the programming language that you use to write any Apple apps, so any iOS apps or anything. So it's a sort of a high-level programming language. This is a text-based programming language. So if you look at this here in this screenshot, this is has a move forward command, move forward, turn left, move forward, and they're all text-based. And Swift Playgrounds, you basically program this little guy to move around in mazes. And they partnered with APH to create tactile graphics for the mazes. I'm not sure if they were available. I was trying to search for them on the web just an hour ago. Yeah, so the other thing I want to mention is that the Swift Playgrounds are accessible with voiceover on both iOS and on desktop, which is cool. Although I think it can be a little challenging to use, are the reports that I've heard. The other thing that I thought was kind of neat, Apple also has provided some different ASL videos that sort of introduce concepts around coding in ASL, and they're just kind of very nicely done. So Apple is really committed to sort of making programming accessible, which is really nice. Another thing I had mentioned, Scratch at the beginning is not being super accessible, but MIT Media Lab, who's the group that created Scratch, has just come out with this really cool app called Octo Studio, which is really fun to play around with, but it is really accessible. They actually brought in accessibility consultants. This is also an app for the iPad that you can download. And I mean, it's both on the iPad and also on Android. And it's really fun. You can actually use like the gyroscopes on the mobile device to input or affect your program. It creates all sorts of fun output. It makes a lot of sounds. Works really well. Both you can construct the programs with the screen reader on, and it also sort of audio narrates the output, so you sort of understand what's going on when you're programming it with the screen reader on, which is really neat. So worth checking out. And then finally, I wanted to highlight, so a lot of them, like the block-based programming languages, are really great starting points for young kids. The Quorum programming language, this was developed out of University of Nevada, Las Vegas. And it's a really cool sort of full environment. They have block-based programming. They have a block-based programming option. You can also switch and do sort of text-based programming. But they have a lot of resources, and it was designed to be fully accessible. It's sort of advertised on their very first page, something they're very proud of, and they've worked really hard to work with people with disabilities to make sure that it remains accessible. But they also have a number of different learning opportunities for not only like students who want to learn Quorum, but also for educators. So in particular, they do some professional development opportunities every year, on developing games and data science and blocks programming. So you can actually, go out for a week. I think it's usually at the Washington State School for the Blind, and learn how to teach with Quorum. They also have a fully accessible AP computer science principles course. They help with making accessible programming for high school students. And there's a lot you can do with Quorum. It's kind of cool. You can build, there's a lot of help around building games that are both 2D and 3D. And you can use it for data science, so you can use it to sort of create data graphics for different things. So it's a very cool language. The other thing I was just learning about is that they created some tactile coding blocks. So you can program on your computer with Quorum. You can do it in the web browser, or you can download their program to do it. But you can also program with these tactile blocks with Braille printed on them, which is kind of cool. And they're just 3D printed blocks, so you can download the files for them and print them if you have a 3D printer as well, which is neat. And then finally, sort of bringing it back to some of the mainstream coding organizations. If you've heard of Hour of Code, which is a big push to get students just learning code, across all grades, just do an hour of code a year. Code.org, which hosts Hour of Code and actually has a lot of free curriculum on there as well. They have just in the last few years added in an accessibility filter when you look at the Hour of Code activities. So you can filter, specifically for activities that work with a screen reader or that have captions, which is nice. It's sort of showing a commitment to accessibility. So it's a good place to start if you're just want to show it. And I think there are probably many more options out there. That was not like a comprehensive list, but talking about that, I'm gonna go ahead and segue in and maybe a little ahead of schedule, but and start talking about Blocks4All, which is the programming environment that I developed. So this is an iPad-based app to teach computer programming. It uses the Dash robot, which is this cute little robot, which is very robust. I've had students throw it, drop it. Works very well. For blind kids, they can kind of hold on to the robot and understand what it's doing, even as it's moving. It's built by the Wonder Workshop, people at Wonder Workshop, who I'm not affiliated with, but the app is accessible with VoiceOver and switch control and voice control on Apple. And it's still under development. But I'll do a quick recorded demo of the app as it currently is in the App Store, and then I'll talk about some of the features that we're adding currently.
All right, welcome. I'm going to do a quick introduction to Blocks4All, the programming environment, and I'll walk through how you use it without any assistive technology enabled, and then I'll also walk through if you have switch control enabled. So this is the welcome screen, and we have a happy robot that will greet you there. But in order to actually use Blocks4All, you hit this play button here, and it takes you to the main workspace. And in the main workspace, you can see on the left-hand side of the screen is a toolbox, which has a bunch of different categories of tools. There's a home button in the top right, and then a play button in the bottom right. So we tried to keep this pretty simple, pretty minimal, nothing too distracting. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go ahead and select one of the categories from this toolbox. So here I'll go ahead and select the sound category. So I'll select the sound category and I can pick, it takes me to a bunch of different blocks corresponding to sounds. And these all have images on them. I can switch to a mode where it just shows text instead, like this. So animal noise, emotion noise, whatever, depending on what age kid you're working with. You can use either images or text. So here I'm going to do this make animal noise, which is the first one. And I can go ahead and move it to the workspace. So one thing we did for actually placing the blocks was ensuring that they can, that we don't use drag and drop, because that can be challenging to do with different AT. So we have like a select, actually add it to space. I tap the workspace to add it, and that's this little bouncing arrow is telling me I can add it right there. So I'm gonna go ahead and tap where that bouncing arrow is, and I now have a make cat noise block in my workspace. You can also change what the noises that it makes by selecting that cat icon. So I'll go ahead and select that cat icon. And you can see I can select from a number of different animal noises. So I don't know, I'll go ahead and make the elephant noise. And then I can go back here. We can add more complicated blocks. So I'm going to go ahead and go into the control category in the toolbox. And I'm going to add what's called a repeat loops that allows you to repeat blocks that are inside it multiple times. So the repeat loop is this very first one, which is kind of that repeat spinning circle. And I'll go ahead and add the tap the workspace once again to add it to the workspace. Then once you have blocks in your workspace, you can move them around. So once again, it's the select, drop. So here I'll go ahead and select this make elephant noise block. And I get into moving mode, and I'm going to go ahead and put it inside of my repeat loop. So here I'll go ahead and click inside of the repeat loop, and it moves it there. So these are sort of basic computer science coding principles, like the repeat loop. We have what are called if statements. The robot will do something if something is true. Principles that the app teaches. And once you have your workspace all set up and you've actually constructed the code you want to do, you can run it on your robot. So to run it on the robot, you go ahead and press this play button. And hopefully hear the robot making that elephant noise. And you can see as it's running, it kind of highlights the code that is currently being played by the robot. So you kind of have an idea of what the robot is doing. So that is how you construct a program without switch control on. But as I said, we designed this to be very accessible with AT. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on switch control and kind of walk through how you do that. So if you're not familiar with switch control, it's iOS software to allow you to control the screen using an external switch. Right now I have this just set up so that I tap the screen to trigger the switch, but you can set up with an external switch. And the way it works, I have it in item scanning mode. So it scans over items on the screen. And then when you tap the screen, it will select the item that you're doing. So imagine someone is unable to select otherwise, they'd be able to do that. So here I've selected this main thing and now it's scanning over the blocks in the control menu. in the toolbox, and then the rest of the thing. So I'll go ahead and select a block out of here. I'm gonna go ahead and select lights. So I can tap to select. And then it scans over the program. Once again, I swing back, scans over the lights menu. I'll go ahead and select this, which turns on the right ear light. And once again, I just need to select the place in the workspace to touch it because it's the select drop. So scanning over the items, switching back. And now I'll select the workspace, and then it scans over the items in the workspace. And I can add it in. So now when my code runs, it will repeat 2 times, making the elephant noise and then turning the left ear light yellow. Let me run that. Shows what it's doing. So that is a brief introduction to Blocks4All and how it works with switch control. Let me know if you have any questions.
All right, so that's Blocks4All, sort of
Welcome.
as it currently is in the App Store. But I do have actually 3 students currently working on it. So these are undergraduate students. This is part of my research. And they are adding all sorts of fun things. So one of the students is building a virtual on-screen robot that you can move around. So you don't need to, say, purchase this robot, which I think is like $150. I'm also having a student looking in at adding the Sphero robot, which is a much cheaper robot. It's like $50 and it's kind of fun. It rolls around and you can get one that looks like a soccer ball in various colors. I also have a student who's adding in other languages. So we're adding in Spanish right now, but there are other languages that would be useful. We'd love that kind of feedback. And then in general, we're all working on making sure to it works well with switch control and voice control. And as part of that, I do have a bit of an ask. We're trying to recruit for a switch control user study. So we've sort of implemented, so it seems like it works well for us with switch control, but we actually want to work with people who use switch control on a regular basis, in particular children and young adults from 5 to 21. To sort of get a better understanding of how to design well for them. So I talked through a lot of accessible programming languages at the beginning, but the majority of them have focused on making them accessible for people who are blind or low vision. And so yeah, we would like to have a better understanding of making sure that it also works for people who are using switches. So if you, so we're sort of recruiting both locally in Minnesota and Washington, but also we can work with remote participants as well. So either people could sort of formally participate in 3 to 4 sessions and give us feedback for $30 a session, or any informal feedback we would also very much welcome. But we really would like to make sure that this app works well for them. And with that was a little quicker. There were questions throughout it. But yeah, just if there are any questions or thoughts or feedback, and a reminder that we're kind of looking for participants for that switch control study, or experts who sort of could evaluate the application and give us feedback on the switch control. And then the last thing, I just want to highlight the Blocks4All website, which also has all our contact information here. And my own email, lmilne@macalester.edu. So if you're interested or have any feedback for me, that would be a good place to reach me. And yeah, that's all that I have. So I'll zoom down. Questions? Heidi, are you in the midst of work?
I have a couple I have more than a couple students I'd love to try this with.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
So I'm not sure kind of how we go about, I think we talked about it before and then life got a little
Yeah.
crazy here. So
Oh,
maybe
yeah.
a reminder on that would be good.
Yeah, so I mean I could reach out, and you're based in Washington, yeah?
Correct.
Um yeah, because that's where Richard is based. So, and I could end up going out to Washington. I remember now we have like this conversation that we
Yeah.
left off. But yeah, I feel like that might be the best thing, is see if I could plan out a trip or something, and just if that would work for you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah. So Lauren, just reach out and we can,
okay.
because I've got two sixth graders that I think would be, you know, really good ones to try it with. And
Yeah.
one of them would definitely give you feedback.
Awesome.